Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavati Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Ayom. 1 second. So we're just now starting the personality chart, which is very the analysis of the different traits, the gunas, in the different aspects of our activity, of our spiritual evolution. So we mentioned earlier the personality chart, and this is where we can start making that chart. So we can make that graph. So it's the science of the 3 gunas, which was mentioned in 19. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And from 20 or 19 to 38, this is what we're going to be talking about. So you get a good picture of your nature, whether it be sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. And the whole idea of the spiritual evolution is to actually evolve from your tamasic trait to sattva, to trans-sattva, so that you evolve, that trans-sattva will transform itself to reveal the self. So that's everybody's mission in life, to evolve through the tamas, sattva, tamas, the rajas, and sattva, to get to that trans-sattvic state, which automatically reveals the self to the self with that process. So it's a science of the 3 gunas. So you get a picture of where you're at through you doing your own personality chart. We already, in the beginning of this chapter, covered sattvic, rajasic, tamasic, renunciation, relinquishment, by stating who is a tyagi, who is a sannyasi, the constituents of that, what a tyagi does, that's the practice, the state of the sannyasi, what that is. So you understand mentally in your daily activities through just that step that if we renounce the fruit of action, maybe we have many desires, many cravings, many things that we're driven to. So you drop the fruit of action in your pursuit, though you may have the desire. And at the backdrop of that desire, that egocentric value, when you can actually drop that, so you've dropped the fruit, and you've also that egocentric desire, that attitude of where your desire is coming from, and then you pursue your action. That's state of sannyas. So that's that sattvic tyag, sannyasi, relinquishment. So here he's going to get into the aspects of, first of all, in these next 6 verses, or 9 verses, in fact, he's going to talk about sattvic, rajasic, tamasic knowledge, actor, and action. So in the verses today, we hope to cover sattvic, rajasic, tamasic knowledge. Everybody has these gunas. You don't escape from them. And in actual fact, the tendency in society, we really only, people don't know the sattvic, rajasic, tamasic gunas And we tend to stay within the evolution of, as we were discussing last week, tamas and rajas. Rajas at best, where you gain all your material possessions. Very narrow is it where you start functioning on, there may be elements of sattva, but very is it that's the predominance. So that's not the era. So you have to really cultivate that from within yourself and understand the other two traits in order to actually, you know, maneuver yourself out of it. So before we actually go further, we had a question. What was the question, Tim, if you'd like to?
The question to begin the class. Our mental temperament is made up of the three gunas, but could there be a fourth quality? Or why are these three such an essential guide? For example, you might describe a person as being very curious or very intelligent or introvert or extrovert. You could use other descriptors in common language to describe people. Why are these three so important?
Okay. Anybody? Is that the question, or is that an extended question from what you've written? If I remember.
Well, I did canvass the question with you and you couldn't understand it, so I've extended.
That was 5 minutes ago. Yes, of course. So if that's more elaborate on the question, anybody have, or would like to go ahead?
Well, I'm happy to respond by going first. I think it appears to me that they're more sort of they're stages of development rather than qualities, say being extroverted or introverted would be. But that leads me to the question of why, if in Vedanta there's such an emphasis on separating these three qualities, but then yoga with Atman appears to be a binary thing in this school of Vedanta that we're following. Why would it be seen as progressive before and then it's no longer incremental, but you're absolutely united with yoga or not?
Sorry. Okay, another question. So just hold that. Is there anybody who has anything more to offer in this question which we had taken, or shall we go? We can take what Peter's asking. Anybody else? Vidya?
I mean, to answer Tim's question, these are the three broad categories. So any transactions within the world, we are saying these are qualities of the mind, or so to speak, of the intellect. So again, we're talking about it at a relative level, at the transactional, ephemeral level of the world where duality exists. And therefore, I think, I don't know, but I'm saying, I think the Vedanta masters have agreed or believe that any activity, any transactional activity in this world can be categorized into one of these three aspects of gunas. But again, it's relative only to the world, not beyond. So it's within, it is bound by the time, space, and causation. So it's in the world of duality, ephemeral world.
Okay. Dharma, you have something to add? Or Tim, you have, or anybody has any response back to that?
And just to add to the conversation that we're having, so my Indian supervisor asked me to write a 10K word assignment on the 3 gunas and how it affects leadership. So when I was going through some other research material, I realized that what Vidya mentioned about how it has a particular boundary, which has to do with the dimensions that we are in. So it corresponds to a sort of fluid aspects in our actions and what are the empowering forces that drive certain people to do certain things. So in that manner, it's bound by certain rules and regulations that I'm still trying to grasp because it's still beyond my thinking ability. So coming back to the question, is there a fourth dimension or a fourth aspect? I didn't see it in any literature with the exception of the 3 states plus Turiya, which is a fourth. But other than that, I didn't see it. But then again, I don't have many years of research under my belt to say anything else. So yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, just to add to that, so all the gunas are bound by the world, but they're a vehicle to enable us to transact through the world, to go from that very inactive state to that objective state. So you mentioned something like curiosity. You could have curiosity in sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic state. Is there a fourth? Is there more than sattva, rajas, and tamas? In effect, you could say there's trans-sattva, which is out of your remit of your own efforts, but is a transformation, which is taking you out of this world to something beyond the opposites, beyond the name and form, to that all-pervading reality. But that's the idea. So could curiosity be taking you in that as a jnani? Yes. As a tamasic person. So the opposite of say a person who's got very few desires, a jnani, that's state of a sannyasi, jnani. To the other side of it, where you're totally tamasic and your actions are based on no knowledge. In fact, we're coming to tamasic knowledge here. It's actually no knowledge. So it's all hearsay in ignorance without thinking. So you could have curiosity on both. One could be a curiosity of things which destroy you. An addict's curious of taking substances, perhaps that type. It doesn't help them, it destroys them, unless they know how to manage it. And even that doesn't help in the long term of evolution. Whereas it increases desire, whereas the opposite is giving you a perspective of objectivity where you don't have the desire. So you're not bound by anything. So you could be curious in all three. You could be curious in a rajasic way, where you want to gain knowledge and knowledge and knowledge or activity, but you're not peaceful inside. So the curiosity, the word curiosity could have those three traits as an example. So is there something beyond that? The only thing we're positing beyond it is fourth state, Turiya, Atman, Brahma, something universal which encompasses the whole. But it's very difficult to conceive because it's out of the remit of the universe. And we have trouble conceiving the universe. Never mind beyond it. I don't know if that's useful.
I have to think about it.
Okay. Sam, you had something to add?
Yeah, just a quick question, if I may.
Then let us take Peter's question first.
Sure.
Is it in relation? Is it actually give the question and then we?
No, it's like I guess I was just wondering, are there different degrees within Sattvika, or are there, like, for example, could it be that one is Sattvika in one area in their life, but then not in another area? Or is it that when you fall within the category of Sattvika through your effort, then your whole life is Sattvika? Does that make sense?
Yes. No, it doesn't work that way. You could be Sattvic and could be Sattvic. I remember someone used to give this example. You could be Sattvic getting up in the morning at 4, 6, that sort of Brahma Muhurta time. But what you're doing at that hours, you may not be studying literature of the high values to evolve. He described the accountant at the time. If they're doing that, because they were doing their books between 4 and 6, and he says, if that's going to help you spiritually evolve, okay, but it's not Sattvic knowledge. Sattvic knowledge is to do with looking at these type of principles wherever you get it from, to evolve you out of this world. The books are only going to keep you in the world. So you don't do that at 4 to 6. So you may have a quality of waking at that time, which is very helpful to you, but you may be doing all and sundry with it. So, or you may be very Sattvic in a particular trait. You may have kindness, but you may serve that kindness to an addict because you don't have the capacity to actually be disciplined to say, no, you don't just give endlessly. There's got to be discipline in how you get the person to, give them drugs or supply, So you may be Sattvic in one quality, it's very evident in certain cultures, but you may be really Tamasic in another aspect. You may be very clean in your house, but you don't care for the outside of your house. You've not got that social consciousness to pick up outside of your remit. It's Tamasic. So it doesn't go across the board. You have to cultivate that. So Sattvic knowledge is pervasive to all of them. If you have that digested within you, you're going to try to cultivate it in other trait areas where you're not that. That's the idea. Back to Peter. Peter, if you just could present your question. Back to it.
Well, I was just wondering if the writers of Vedanta helped us understand perhaps our spiritual development through these 3 categories, which they apply value judgments to, and obviously Sattvika is somewhere where we want to get to. And as we've discussed, that it's sort of incremental in that you can have aspects of all 3 going at once. My question is why, when it gets to the final enjoyment with Atman, where we have a clear view of Atman and we feel connected with Brahman completely, why that must be such a binary thing, and is that to be intellectually consistent or philosophically consistent, or does it really help us on our spiritual journey, that knowledge or that idea? And I think it's something, and another question is, do we think biologically if one is biologically still alive, one can have complete yoga with Atman.
Okay. So is your question, last question, saying, can you be realized if you are still alive? Is that the question?
Yeah, I understand it's a heavy question to deal with at 8:30 in the morning, and
Better 8:30 than later in the day.
Different schools of thought will have different ideas, but
Okay.
I'd like to hear your view, Harold.
Okay. So to answer the last part of the question very quickly, the tradition is yes. In Vedanta, there's two schools of thought. One which says that you can't be realized until physical death. The other one which says the progression, you can be realized whilst you're still alive. The idea being that it's the physical death of the ego. The path that we're following in this classroom is of, that you can be realized whilst you're still alive. There's no point once you're dead. I mean, from our perspective anyway. But the whole idea, so the whole idea is that you don't have desires as such, your objective. So coming back to where we're talking about, and Peter's question before that is in terms of sattva, rajas, and tamas being a mechanism to evolve. Yes, you may have different varying degrees of sattva, rajas, and tamas in your personality. And the idea is to evolve through them to get to the self. Sattva being that state of objectivity, poise, where in whatever that area is that you maintain that sattva, you don't have a desire. When the desire comes up, it may cloud your judgment. That's where you may be rajasic, whatever it is. So the whole idea is to utilize them, yes, to get to Atman. Why? What are they? They're just thought textures, which enable you to see things more universally and identify with things as I say, as you and one and the same thing. So they dissolve that separateness. So that's the idea. So they're just different. Their names for which seem to go universally across the board of humans and beings. It doesn't matter who you are, what you are. We all have these traits. We all have a trait either to be idle. We all have a trait which is driven for things in the world. We all have a trait in us which the little bird tells us there's something more than what's in this world. So a very generalized way of putting it, that there's something within us which we can, when we open up to it, there's something more than just what's in the world to acquire and enjoy, as it were, because it doesn't seem to last. So we're after something more permanent, and this is giving us a mechanism to think about it. Is it true? Is it not true? It's not it's a matter of analysis. It's a matter of verifying it for yourself. You may not call it sattva, rajas, and tamas, but it's your own verification of where you begin to see things more universal, more, you become more in touch with that, what's the word? You see that, you could say divinity, for want of a better word. Something which runs throughout all, something which doesn't separate you, something which connects you, or something which creates a barrier to you feeling that well-being. Yeah, so you could call it what you like. really doesn't matter. But this is a mechanism that we can use. Our thought textures. Broadly speaking, goods or bads. But that makes it too simplistic. Goods and bads. There's something beyond that. So the sattva catapults us out, and we can cultivate that. The whole idea of this is, where do you stand in your own spiritual evolution, and how do you cultivate that spark in you to evolve? So that's the idea of this sattva, rajas and tamas. It's giving you a sort of a measurement, a picture of one's own evolution in relation to the world. I don't know if that's answering what you're asking, actually.
Yeah, it was quite helpful. I mean, I could follow on, but I think it's better to move on to the next verses. Yeah.
Mm. So it's a mental attitude, this practice of your evolution. And what we're going to be looking at in terms of our evolution is the different traits are knowledge. First of all, we did Tyaga, renunciation, knowledge, action, actor, happiness, intellect, and steadfastness. These are the traits we're going to be looking at sattva, rajas, and tamasic throughout this chapter. And so if you ever want to look back, this is the complete sort of like personality chart. Curiosity, maybe you could add curiosity into it, but I think it falls somewhere in. You can apply it to any trait, in fact. Once you've got the backdrop of these, well, these are the constituents to it seems. So let's go. Verse 20.
सर्वभूतेषु येनैकं भावम् अव्ययम् ईक्षते अविभक्तं विभक्तेषु तज्ज्ञानं विद्धि सात्विकम्.
Mm-hmm. So here he's defining the first sattvika knowledge. Sam, if you could read the verse.
Verse 20. That by which one sees the one indestructible being in all beings, inseparate in the separate, know that knowledge to be sattvika.
Mm-hmm. So, which sees the indestructible in all beings. So they can't be separated. There's no separate entity. So, avibhaktam vibhakteshu, in the separate, the inseparate, in the separate, no doubt to be sattvika. So remember, from 20 to 39, we're going to be looking at this personality trait where we can make the graph. The inseparate in the separate. If you look at our world today, the attitude that we maintain is always something separate. It's mine, my community, my culture, my people, my society, my family, my children. My house, my possessions, my job, my status, my position. It might extend a little bit, but it's still, there's a separateness. So a sattvic person is dissolving that, is dissolved that. It understands that we're a combination, a human being's combination of the body, mind, and intellect. But what gets destroyed at death is not the Atman, but the body. So understands the perishable nature of things. Sattvic person understands that. Understands that everything moves in the medium of that universal principle of Atman, Brahman consciousness. Just as fishes move in water, waves come out of the ocean. One sees the ocean, not the waves. Birds fly in the medium of air. All ornaments are gold. These are the standard sort of examples to just reflect on now and again and extend them into your actual everyday life. So that one who sees the indestructible in what we see as the destructible. The divinity in the diversity. Understands everything's name and form is transient, but there's something backing it. Understands the underlying reality. So it's a mental attitude. It's not bookish knowledge. It goes beyond the norm of society, because society generally hits the ceiling of, as we were talking about last week, rajas. So one's role is to try and play as in harmony as possible with the whole. Always looking at the universal value, in which case you wouldn't, if you think the next child is yours, then whether you have children, everybody's child becomes yours. Everybody's person is yours. Every animal is yours. Every creature is yours. If that's the case, you can't have baby chops. You can't have veal cutlets. You can't do it. You see a snail in the rain, you pick it up, put it aside. It's your identification with everything. You don't make a differentiation, am I Russian? Am I Indian? Am I English? We're all human beings. There's not a differentiation, am I Hindu? Am I Muslim? We're all human beings. We're all beings. So you can't make that differentiation with sattvic knowledge. You understand it's all the same. That's what we have to raise ourselves with. Let's read the divinity in the diversity. There's appreciation for all. Let's read it.
Verses 20, 21, and 22 describe Sattvika, Rajasika, and Tamasika jnana, knowledge. Sattvika jnana is that knowledge by which you recognize the Supreme Being in all, the Self, Atman, as the core of being, the reality that pervades the phenomenal world. Knowledge of the underlying unity in the diversity of the world, the homogeneous principle uniting the heterogeneous variety of things and beings. With Sattvika knowledge, you harmonize with the infinite expression in the pluralistic world, you blend with the melodies of life orchestra.
So you can either, what happens if you don't play in the orchestra with the orchestra? Say you're part of the orchestra and you decide to play your tune. What's it sound like?
Just noise, not melody, no music. It's unsynchronized.
So the universe has some synchronicity where all things happen in unison. And ours is to play our role as harmoniously as we can, to fit into that without creating the least friction, which means you've got to run smoothly, whatever your role is in life. Play your role in the orchestra to your optimum, but with the consideration you're part of that orchestra, part of that universe. You don't do that if there's some underlying value. Otherwise you fall out of sync, it's noise. It depends on the way you want to see it. You can see it alak, separate, or you can see it as you're part of that unity. It's a choice. You can say it's my right to do whatever I like. I'm a human being. I have the capacity above everybody else to decide to destroy or for my means or to play in harmony. We've always got a choice. So it's understanding that divinity and the diversity. Where's your focus? Is it on the divinity or the diversity? You've always got a choice. The indestructible in the destructible. Let's read the last bit.
Satvika knowledge from a relative point of view is looking at manifold waves as one ocean, viewing ornaments as metal gold, pots as mud, garments as cotton.
So you have to think about the way you extend your identification in the world to create that harmony within your swadharmic nature, within your vocation, whatever you're doing in life. Because you can't dismiss that at this stage when you've got lots of asanas. But how do you play your part smoothly? How do you identify with that divinity? So let's, Tim, if you can just bring up the graph. How you could actually devise your, if you want to do a chart, personality chart, actually, you might be thinking, well, what am I in terms of sattva? You can put your own percentages in. You don't have to tell anybody. So this is just something created. You could create a better version of this, but it's just a general way that you could. So these are the different things that we've been looking at in this chapter. We go to the top. We just come to the top. So personality chart. So you've got sattva, rajas, and tamas. So you can do this over a period of time, and in those little narrow columns, you can put each day or whatever, what you think your sattva, rajas, and tamas is throughout the day. Just to make yourself aware in terms of what sort of knowledge you're taking in, what kind of activities you are, what kind of actor you are, what sort of intellect are you applying, what's your steadfastness, what sort of happiness are you after, which we're going to come to. So just for your information, can we put this in the WhatsApp, or can we send this out to everybody? And anybody wants to use it, or you can make your own. You can use it as some sort of template.
I'll send it out.
So you can just do this over a period of time. So you get an assessment for yourself of what you're at. It's just up to you if you want to do it. Some people tend to put 90% sattvic. Then after a while, they realize it might not be quite that. So when you get the gist of what we're talking about, it just gives you an assessment for yourself. Sattvic knowledge, the one who sees the divinity in the diversity. To the extent that you can do that, that's your sattvic knowledge. Before we move, is there any question with this? Move to 21. Tim.
I understand what you said, seeing the divinity in the diversity. A lot of our lives, though, are spent looking at diversity, increasing the diversity. The scientist divides metals into elements, gold into neutrons and protons, or whatever the current theory is. So looking and creating more and more diversity is part of what we do.
Often scientists may be creating a diversity to find an empirical formula of what's underlying it all. So creating a diversity within the remit of the world, if it's for the value of creating a harmony, then they're looking at an empirical value. Call it what you want. They're looking at something universal. What's that universal element in the whole? But if they're creating a diversity to create a division, which can be always used different ways, then it's destructive to your spiritual evolution. So, Oppenheimer quoted the verse in the Bhagavad Gita, and the bomb was used for destructive causes, atomic bomb, but his intention was not that. So human beings will do all sorts of different things. Where's your mind is what's really important in the thought, the attitude. So scientists may do all sorts of things, but Einstein was talking about I'm just giving very basic examples. It's more complex than this, but Einstein was talking about the God particle, and as soon as he was mentioning the God particle, something beyond, relative to something beyond, he was getting his wrist slapped because nobody wanted to talk about it, because when the whole society is in the remit of Rajas, it's very difficult to express these sorts of ideas of unity because it doesn't seem possible. So one creates the diversity with the intention of either destruction or unity. The more and more we sometimes hear in society, the more diverse, the better. So it's all only saying the more diverse the cultures or things, the more understanding we have of everybody, the totality. But if you actually raise the bar of your knowledge or your actions or your intellect to see within the diversity, there's a divinity, the same. And that's very different than making segregations. This is mine, and it's different than yours. If you understand, if that makes sense.
I think I was just commenting upon the tension. Like everyone in this room has a different name. We give each person a distinct name. And yet at the same time, we're trying to find that unity and that diversity. Just like everyday activities are, there's a tension between these two things.
Of course, because our focus is on the changing elements of the world, the opposites. But once one turns introvert and starts looking at everybody not as Dharma, Peter, Vidya, Parul, Tim, Sam, but looks at we all have the same Atman. We may have different qualities which we express, but there's something very universal within us all. And we might not be able to stretch it to Atman, but we may stretch it beyond countries, saying we're all learning the same knowledge, say, or we're all human beings, or we're all thinking on something of a similar knowledge. So you bring a unity in that. When you can extend that unity to the whole, you see the divinity and the diversity. That's a practice, because right now everything is the opposite of that. But this is putting forward there is something else more than creating separateness. So one appreciates that we are all different. We all have different qualities, different names, different countries, different cultures, but who can see the underlying value in all of that diversity? It's not to stop it, it's just to understand what's backing it. It'd be sad to watch a comedy and not understand there's also tragedy. And often tragedy comes out of comedy. There are aspects of life which are pairs of opposites. Depends how you view it. But it's how the capacity to have that universal vision in all is what it's talking about. Understanding the diversity, what's backing it. It's not saying there is not diversity, it's just understanding what's backing it. It's one and the same in all. So focus on that rather than bringing the tension on we're all separate. Understand the separateness, but what brings that unity. General tendency is to do the next verse, 21. Is why this arises. 21.
पृथक्त्वेन तु यज्ञानं नानाभावन् पृथक्विधान् वेत्ति सर्वेषु भूतेषु तज्ज्ञानं विद्धि राजसम्.
Peter, if you could read the verse.
Yes, I'll quickly read the verse and then I'll need to go. Verse 21, but that knowledge which by differentiation sees distinction and variety in all beings, know that knowledge to be Rajasika.
So this one sees, as we're saying, separateness, distinction, manifold existence, the opposite of sattvic. It sees diversity instead of seeing divinity. It misses the divinity. It sees the individual as plant, animal, and human. It sees beings and objects as different. You don't see them as all living beings. It's separate, separate, separate. Alak, alak, alak. You see a person as Chinese, Russian, Japanese. You don't see them as people. You see an animal separate from yourself. You don't see it as all part of the whole creation. You see the religions as Hindu, Buddha's mine and yours. Create the tension. It's Rajasic. You see yourself better than the other person. It's rajasic. Not understanding we're all at different stages. There's a divinity within all. So it's the rajasic person is very much focused outward rather than inward, very much focused on the separateness rather than the universality. Very much focused on the material rather than the universal, spiritual. Very much focused on desire and what I can get out of it rather than what am I part of, what I need to put back as I'm debtor. So that's rajasic. Most of society sees things on the whole in a rajasic manner at the best. Hence why we have wars, mine and yours. Nobody's got the foresight to really act on the whole all of the time. Let's read it. Dharma, if you could read the verse, read the
Rajasika jnana is knowledge by which you regard all beings as distinct and manifold, separate from one another. You see a diversity instead of an underlying unity, the pluralistic phenomena of this world, not the supreme reality. A knowledge that sets distinction, differentiation, division in beings, as human, animal, and plant, and humans as different races and faces, creeds and breeds, all along missing the core, self, Atman. Rajasika knowledge is the opposite of Sattvika knowledge. Again, from a relative point of view, Rajasika knowledge sees manifold waves, not the underlying ocean, different ornaments, not gold, garments, not cotton.
So, in your personality chart, you've done sattvic and rajasic knowledge. You can check it out till next week, what you're about. And think about on the predominance, it's rajasic or tamasic knowledge, no knowledge. So it's to actually examine what's going on in your environment and with yourself. Whereabouts do you want to place the focus? It's always a choice. It's always a choice of where do you want to place the focus. You have to examine what you do, what your activities are, what your thinking is, and all the things that you pursue. So the activity could be the same, the knowledge could be the same. It's how do you maneuver it? What's your thinking behind it? What are the thought textures, mental temperaments of you which decide it to be one or the other? Anyway, and that one we'll do tamasic knowledge, which is no knowledge really. We don't really have to do it, but it's just to remind us of the things which could happen or we may be at, we want to get out of next week. Hari Om.